You arrive at a sleepy little town in the middle of nowhere, and the town council as well as all the town's children are trapped by some kind of divine magic, and no one seems to be able to solve this mystery. What do you do? This is the setup of Nightmare over Ragged Hollow, the module I've been running for the last few months with one of my groups. Today, I'll give you a rundown of what this adventure is about and share how my group tackled it. There will be spoilers, obviously, but I'll keep the big reveal towards the end of the video, right before the final dungeon. The adventure is published by the Merry Mushman, which you might know from the Knock magazines. The adventure is written by Joseph R. Lewis and it was designed for old school essentials for characters level 1 to 2. We've run it in Cairn though, which is a level and classless system, and it worked perfectly well. So don't worry if you want to convert it to a different system. Before we dive in, I just want to quickly talk about the cover, which is super cool because it doubles as a resource for running the game. The back features a map of the region, while the inside has a map of the town and final dungeon. So yeah, the physical copy is pretty cool, but it's time to get to the main story. What is Nightmare over Ragged Hollow actually about? Ragged Hollow is a quaint little town in the middle of nowhere. When your party arrives, they find a temple encased in a dome of golden light that repels anyone who tries to enter. Inside are the town's leadership, which are the priests as well as all of the town's children. There's also treasure in there, in case the children aren't incentive enough for your place to do something about it.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
A young acolyte who was out getting milk witnessed the dome's formation and recalled seeing two heavily armed women visiting the temple the previous night. Now he's staying at the local inn. There's also a list of rumors, 10 true and 10 false, including one about a young man named Tobias seen begging at the temple for help. I'm not a big fan of false rumors, I prefer half-true ones, but that's what we got. Anyway, now every night the clock tower's bell tolls 36 times and both players and townfolk experience nightmarish horrors. There's this handy table of events for rolling these, which I found super useful. There's no way into the temple for a full week. I thought my players might find this delay frustrating, but they leaned into the mystery and focused on investigating the town, which is really cool. Which leads us to the town of Ragged Hollow itself. And I have to say, this is a fantastic starting town with engaging NPCs. Each location is tying into the main plot or adding depth to the story. Most locations include a story hook. What's really great about that is how the information is presented in this whole adventure. You can take a single glance at the page, and if you've read it before, you usually know what it's about. Check out number 5, which is really funny. It's an old wizard who offers some magical services and offers money for dwarven artifacts. Maybe that got something to do with the dwarven tomb Tobias went to. And this wizard knows nothing about what's going on in town. I played it up as his main character trait and my players just loved it. My group headed straight to the inn to question the witness, who told them about Lady Constance, a paladin who entered the temple the night before. The local blacksmith and the owner of the general store recalled Tobias planning to visit the dwarven tomb on Mount Morn. There's also talk of a witch in the nearby Gloom woods and a hefty bounty on the bandits in the Wailing Hills. All nice motivation for your players. A foul smell from the well led my players to discover a sickly goblin who got cursed by a witch, while there's also a hook about basement infested with vermin, because every good starting town needs that one quest. Those two quests are connected, by the way. The sickly goblin is secretly creating those spider creatures because, well, he's kinda spiteful. What it doesn't tell you right away though, is that you should also check the very end of the book, which includes cool NPCs for your adventure. They can be used as retainers, replacement characters, or you can just put them into the town, because most of them come with a personal quest or at least a connection to the plot somehow. Among others, I've used the dwarves Gilba and Bilba, who my players found really memorable. Those two can easily be connected toward the dwarven tomb because they're looking for their legacy. I've also used Annika, who came up as a random encounter later on. I gave her an obsession with the demonic goat. Really, check those out for extra inspiration before running this adventure. There are real gems in there. One of the best parts about this town are the rival factions, who could become either allies or foes. The Ragdolls is a gang of troublemaking young women, and Bogdan's crew is a group of bandits. Bogdan's crew is after a cigar shipment from the bandits in the Wailing Hills, and they say they don't want to be involved in the town's trouble at all. The last part of the town is a little dungeon, the Windler House. Samson Windler was a tinkerer who had trapped his manor and was on a quest for eternal life. It seems he lost his mind and attacked townsfolk later on, before being thrown into the dungeon of the temple. The Windler house is one of the few parts of this adventure that I didn't like too much. It's a dungeon where each single room is trapped and not much else is going on, aside from some goblin rats that are connected to the sickly goblin and the witch. There's cool magic items for crabs though, and I almost forgot about that actually. Shouldn't there be a door from the kitchen to the rest of the house? But just look at this goblin rat. I love it. The expression is just so goofy. Just look at the silly bugger. I love the art in this book. And before we now get to the wilderness map, maybe take a moment to like and subscribe. The wilderness in this adventure has 3 parts: the Gloom Wood, the Bleak Mountains and the Wailing Hills, which my players tackled in this order. Each of these locations got their own list of random encounters, and I think there's some real bangers among them. Like the ragdolls showing up. Always a lovely sight, my players immediately befriended them. On the other hand, there are also some on there which I found a bit uninspiring. I would have loved to get something a bit different, to be honest. Most of all some weather events or maybe a bit more thought-provoking procedures for traversing the area instead of just random encounters. The Gloom Wood got quite some stuff going on. There's a witch in here who can help players with advice and lifting curses. She has actually seen Tobias, who asked her for advice opening the dwarven tomb on Mount Morn. She told him not to. She wants some help with the goblins because they constantly come to steal her cookies, and she's offering a magic item for that. A broom that brooms on its own. There is a goblin market going on in the woods, only at night though. They want to be included in human society and have thus kicked out the weird goblin rats who now live in the Windler house. You can see, everything here is connected somehow. Great part of the adventure. They are also selling all kinds of magical knickknacks, and instead of money they are willing to accept other forms of payment like a fish's tears of joy. Oh look, there's a big fish! My players immediately asked what would make her shed tears of joy. And the answer was to kill the stupid beaver in the north. The beaver told them to kill the stupid fish. Both of them promise cool magic items to the party if getting rid of the other. That is if the voracious fish doesn't eat the players first. But there's also something lurking in these woods that is without question absolutely evil. A hag named Orla who loves eating the flesh of sapient creatures and has cursed the poor goblins who now live in the Windler house. Aside from her magic items, she also carries the same necklace as the witch Beatrix. I wonder how those two are connected, but that's left to the GM. I made them sisters, kind of. Next up we got the Wailing Hills. In here you can find an ogre, and a group of bandits has built their hideout in a ruined tower. The ragdolls are also around, planning to rob the bandits blind. This area is connected to Bogdan and his gang, who will discreetly follow the player characters if they realize the party wants to go there. And I think Bogdan's the kind of guy who will use the first chance to stab them in the back. And this is just a cool piece of world building. This mural depicts aliens sharing their wisdom with ancient hominids. The ogre living in these hills is actually something my players didn't encounter, but I'm pretty sure you can use it against the bandits somehow if you want to. Speaking of the bandits, their hideout is another dungeon and it is loaded with valuable treasure. Also, those guys are rolling cigars out of scorpion venom and paper they steal from the paper mill, and they work as drugs that not only make you lightheaded but also enable you to see the dead in other parts of the adventure. And last we got the Bleak Mountains. We got a 3-eyed devil goat stalking the players, a basilisk and harpies living somewhere close by, and a hermit who kidnaps and murders townfolk that gets lost around here. But the most interesting location is Mount Morn, the place where Tobias went. It features a dungeon full of kobolds, the one with dog heads, not the dragony ones, and a burial mound. Which is a tiny bit disappointing because I think that one should have actually been a dungeon. Anyway, in this burial mound it lurks, the thing that caused all the trouble. A slimy blob that can infect people and possess them. And this is what happened to poor Tobias. So, what's really going on here? Tobias got infected with the Dolores Ica, it's the blob I just mentioned. It's an ancient evil that you can give whatever backstory you want. I went with the ancient alien world from the hills and said it's an alien parasite. Anyway, to help Tobias, the priests put a crown of dreams onto him to soothe his madness. Unfortunately, the parasitic creature used the crown to manifest unspeakable nightmares into the temple. Lady Constance raised the golden veil to contain this evil. This is the golden sphere around the temple. At the beginning, the people inside the temple are caught in some kind of time lock until 7 days have passed and the golden veil has shrunk enough for the party to actually enter the dungeon. Remember that bell tolling 36 times each night? This indicates how many people in the temple are actually still alive. From now on, each night the GM rolls a d4 to determine how many of them die. The bell tolling less and less often with each passing night. You have that really useful tracking list and I recommend you actually use it, otherwise you might forget that 2 of those guys are already dead when your players get there. Which happened to a friend of mine who is not me. When the last villager dies, the golden veil falls and nightmares take over the town and then slowly the whole region. Which leads us to the bad ending. Everything is sinking into chaos and 666 days later, Highness Constance will declare war on the lands around Hecate Hollow. Fun. I really love that there's a timer towards the end. It gives a sense of urgency. And my players immediately figured out that it's some kind of countdown that they should take care of. But I rolled 2 ones in a row and they assumed, well, that's just ticking down slowly. Until suddenly 4 people died in one night. Oops. So, let's take a look inside this nightmarish dungeon and the heart of the adventure. This dungeon is a nightmarish hellscape. There's blood and body parts and weird mutant things everywhere. The GM is also encouraged to ask the players for their characters' nightmares to include in them as well. This dungeon is very thematic and it's built like an actual temple, which seems cool at a glance, but it also allows players to just ignore all those rooms in there and march right through. Which I think is not that much of a problem, because there are really cool NPCs in this dungeon that are only willing to help if the players manage to save the survivors, so there's actually an incentive to look around. At the very start, your player characters can find Sister Ruth, a frail old priest who can't really help you, unless you destroyed her voodoo doll that the hack in the woods is holding. So, properly exploring the area around can really pay off. There's all kinds of weird enemies around, like a floating goat head, XP draining leeches and mutant children with piranhas for heads. Players might also find Squire Felicity and Lady Constance, the paladin Justin told you about, who are powerful allies if you save the civilians. Also, you might remember Samson Windler from earlier. On his quest for immortality, he turned into a shadow and is now a prisoner in the vault. Another great role-playing opportunity if your players investigated the Windler house and try to figure out what it's about. And in the cellar, the players will finally face the source of evil. Tobias has been transformed into this terrible creature, his body fused into the wall. He's beyond saving, for his body has already died and the parasite is just using him as a puppet. If you remove the crown, the nightmares vanish. The infected NPCs still have to be taken care of though. I've already told you what happens if the characters fail to remove the Crown of Dreams. But if they manage to, they get an incredible amount of gold. The inhabitants of Hecate Hollow will be forever thankful, and on the next day the bandits from the Wailing Hills turn up to take over the town. My players didn't deal with them in advance, so they had to take care of that now, but with help from some townsfolk, so that was not a big problem actually. Some final thoughts. I think Nightmare over Hecate Hollow is a fantastic starting adventure, which you can also easily drop into your ongoing campaign. And that's the coolest thing about it. It fits into basically any fantasy setting where you have room for just 3 hexes. It's really easy to play, and honestly reading the whole thing once, which is only about 80 pages, is enough to reference straight from the book afterwards. You don't need notes. You can see at one glance what's going on, what the NPCs are like and what loot is waiting. A good layout just goes a long way. The region map is really useful. You can see how long it takes to get anywhere, and the appendix for the NPCs are just awesome. The magic item appendix is technically missing some items, and sometimes it's hard to figure out where an item is from, like the chameleon skin boots just says Fergus, which you might not remember is the leader of the bandits in the hills. But that's just me being nitpicky. The only things I'd change in this adventure are the Windler house and the burial mound with the slime. For the latter, I'd put a 5-room dungeon in there and call it a day. For the Windler house, I asked my players what they thought about it, and they really loved interacting with the ghost and the goblin rats. So maybe not liking this trapped house is just a me problem. On the other hand, they went through there extremely carefully and just deactivated all the traps, so I don't know. That just shows the OSR is deadly, but if you go through dungeons carefully, nothing bad will happen to you. So, Ragged Hollow is an intriguing town on its own, and I really recommend running this adventure. Even without the overarching story and the final dungeon, the areas around it are just cool enough on their own, and I'm sure you can steal them for your own campaign and throw them somewhere onto your map. They don't even have to be connected as hexes. But now I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments if you liked it or if you know other cool starting adventures. And if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe. Have a fun game night and a great week!